Got you feeling nostalgic, huh? The most underrated part of any great game, without question, is the title screen. They are the first interactive element we experience in any game and are pivotal to framing our expectations for the rest of it. They are to games what the first shot of a film is to movies. A great one can be so powerful that seeing it will hit you like a tidal wave and prepare you for everything that comes after. Like, let's look at this. Everyone here who's played Kingdom Hearts 2 immediately began to get chills the second they heard Dearly Beloved, and at least one of you are going to go replay it right now. I wasn't even one of those Kingdom Hearts kids. You know the ones.
Don't hit the camera, man.
Dual wield!
But hearing and seeing this is almost overpowering, and I earnestly believe it's one of the largest contributing factors to what gives Kingdom Hearts 2 its fairy tale-esque atmosphere. So, abrupt transition, due to how varied they are in both tone and quality, let's look at the title screens of all of the 3D Zelda games and see if we can learn anything about how they've used their titles to perfectly set the stage for all of their games, for better and worse. Also, a quick note, if pressing start skips over it instead of bringing up the title, it ain't part of the title screen. That said, let's get started. Everything about Ocarina of Time's title is meant to evoke awe and a sense of adventure. As we fade in on the setting moon, we are greeted by the distant noise of Epona's trot. Shortly after, the iconic piano begins to play, and there's something remarkable about it, especially from a modern design perspective. It's incredibly restrained, inviting, and even kind of relaxing. Rather than try to hype you up for the experience, it's eager to hold the door open for you and casually invite you in with a smile. Link enters, and it's here that the sense of scale is established. Link not only feels far away, but it feels as though he's crossing a massive space. Not just because he looks so small on the plane, but because we heard him traveling for a while before we actually saw him. And just like that, without playing the game in the least, it feels large. The camera cuts towards the ground to keep the screen fairly clean as the logo fades in. The game's famous ocarina line comes in while the camera pans up as we climb a hill. As we reach the top, the camera breaks away from Link to show Hyrule bathed in dawn light, showing not only that there will be other people in this world, but what it is we'll be fighting for. From here, the footage begins to show Link riding Epona across Hyrule Field. And it does serve to make the world feel a little more developed, but the title's core job is done at this point. You press start and it's celebrated with this bold, strong chirp that feels satisfying to hear. This title captures everything Ocarina strives to be. Innocent, personal, and massive. It's not interested in selling you the experience of Link, but rather the experience of the world. Because in Ocarina, that is what matters most. The Majora's Mask title is almost the exact opposite of Ocarina's. Where Ocarina aimed to be comforting, Majora aims to be oppressive and unsettling. It opens with a black screen as the titular mask spirals towards you with a deep, ominous roar before retreating away. It then cuts to the mask merchant, creep backpack and all, proud of his new find as he lets out a cackle. We transition from here to our first view of Termina, and over the course of several small scenes showing Link watching other people go about their day-to-day lives, have already begun placing the greater focus on the characters rather than the world they exist in, a factor that becomes pivotal as the game's story progresses. This ultimately climaxes with the camera moving through the town at night before panning up the ever-important clock tower as the music becomes more and more discordant to reveal Skull Kid looking up at the moon, waiting for his chance to begin the events of the game. The logo fades in with the eye of Majora's Mask atop the eye of the moon, reflecting their connection. This image is incredibly powerful, especially coming off the back of a game as emotionally pure and optimistic as Ocarina. This may be the first image in the entire series that is genuinely intimidating, and given the contents of Majora itself, this sets the stage perfectly. Everything about Majora's Mask as a whole can be summed up as Zelda, but sinister. And this title screen perfectly captures that. My one slight criticism is that upon pressing start, the same cheery rising chirp of Ocarina plays. And here it feels out of place, an odd bit of pep in an otherwise dark scene. However, this does very little to dampen the impact that this screen has. The slow, melancholic music, the foreboding image of the spiraling mask, and the haunting gaze of the moon flawlessly prepares you for the game that follows. It all feels like Zelda, but it feels absolutely nothing like Zelda. Wind Waker opens on a shot of the sky, staring almost directly at the sun while the crashing waves can be heard in the background. It's so bright that it's almost painful to look at. Sky shots have traditionally been symbolic of freedom, at least since the Dragon Ball Z OP popularized them, and combined with the waves, serve to set the stage for the kind of sprawling journey you're about to go on. A gust of wind pushes the King of Red Lions into the shot, causing him to block the blinding sun, thereby emphasizing the importance of both the wind and your ship. The merriest jig you've ever heard begins to spring to life. The camera pans down, showing Outset Island in all of its bright, colorful splendor amongst the massive sea as the iconic flute riff kicks in. Finally, the camera begins to give a tour of the island and its inhabitants. And upon pressing start, the game responds with a chime that, while different from Ocarina's, feels just as cheery. This is Wind Waker in a nutshell. Everything you could ever need to know about what kind of experience Wind Waker is going to be is right here. You get the shot of the sky and the sea, making it clear that this is going to be a swashbuckling seafaring adventure. The zoomed out shot of the island with the sea stretching into the horizon sells the grand scale of the game. The island immediately clarifies the way in which people live in this drowned world. And finally, the upbeat song sets the tone for the lighthearted, playful adventure you're about to embark on into a world that is overjoyed to see you. This screen is about as perfect as they get. Twilight Princess is where things begin to fall apart, but we finally get some contrast. While not a bad title screen, TP somewhat fails at setting the tone. It opens on Link just kind of standing there, doing nothing for like 4 seconds. And it's awkward. Here, I'll rewind it and play it so you can see what it looks like. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's weird, and I can't help but feel that more could have been done with it. Anyways, Link rides Epona across a dust-coated bridge of Eldin, Hyrule Castle off far in the distance. But without much in the foreground to give it a sense of scale, it doesn't do much to make the world feel large in the way Ocarina or Wind Waker did. The camera watches Link charge off the bridge before giving way to a drab brown field while accompanied by a cappella chanting. If you wait around for about a full minute, Link transforms into his wolf form in front of what turns out to be a magical barrier, though to the untrained eye it may look like a sandstorm or plastic wrap as the title fades in. To top it off, upon pressing start, you are treated to the sound of a sword unsheathing, which does contribute to the game's more realistic style, but if there was any title calling for a mystic chime in the series, it was this one. This title doesn't really work. First off, the startup is entirely too long and uneventful. The horse ride across a bare, flat plain shows us nothing about the world except that they have fences. Compare this to Ocarina, where we see Lon Lon Ranch and Epona drinking from the river if you hang around about as long. It's not much, but it does show us a little more about the world and set the tone a little more thoroughly. Likewise, while Majora's title is longer, it shows enough varied imagery and does enough world building before the logo comes up that it doesn't feel like it's wasting your time. Twilight fails to use its time to show us anything really meaningful about the world until maybe the end. Secondly, it does little to set the core moods of the game that follows it. Twilight Princess's atmosphere and themes are mystic and dark with a sense of looming threat and power always hanging over you, but this title basically gets none of that across. We're greeted by a warm, orange dusk light spilling across the gritty brown land. This sight, especially in gaming's visual vocabulary, equates with realism, which is close to the last thing that Twilight Princess actually is. The music helps a bit to sell the ethereal atmosphere, but the song itself probably stands as the most forgettable to ever grace a Zelda title screen. Ultimately, this title isn't terrible, it's just not very interesting or memorable. It serves its purpose and nothing more, but it should be doing a lot more than that. Finally, there's Skyward Sword, and look, I'm not in the Skyward Sword is worse than kicking puppies camp, but it definitely has its problems, and the title screen is one of them. This title screen is kind of the worst, and does a great job of showing the lost potential of putting no effort into these elements. It does absolutely nothing to characterize the experience you're about to have except for the fact that it's going to take place predominantly in the sky, I guess? And even that's questionable because, as I said before, shots of clear blue sky have basically been visual shorthand for freedom more than anything for a long time. And this is widely accepted as the most linear Zelda game, and the developers could have embraced that. And while the sound of blowing wind does do a good job of confirming that, yes, the sky is very much a major element in this game, it's at the cost of any actual music to set the stage. Which is why I've taken the liberty of adding my own music here. This is what it actually sounds like. That's right, it's nothing. Even the chime that plays when you press start sounds confused as to what's going on. Why is the sun taking up like a fifth of the screen? The game narratively or mechanically has nothing to do with the sun. Why is it such a big focus? Skyward Sword's main drive, at least in comparison to other 3D Zelda games, is character. Zelda, Link, Girahim, Groose, and an actual piece of trash are some of the most thoroughly developed characters in the franchise's history, yet we see nothing about them through this, no imagery to establish them. Are you bored of seeing the screen as I talk over it? Because I don't blame you, I would be too, because that's what this is. It's boring and bad, just like Skyward Sword, whoops! I realize all my critiques here may seem petty and nitpicky, and yes they are, but first impressions are unbelievably important, and for games, those are title screens. We may mash past them the moment we encounter them, and we may not even notice what they're saying to us, but our brains do. I remember the first time I played Wind Waker quietly gasping in awe as I saw how amazing the island and sea looked. It was probably the first time I was stunned by a game's visuals, and that excited me for everything that would come after, and that was just Wind Waker. I could bring up how games like Metal Gear Solid and the entire Metroid series use their intros to establish the whole tone, but I'll save that for another day. The point is this: with games there are a million different ways to build tone. From mechanics to art to music and everything in between, but your experience with that tone, no matter what, will always begin with the title screen. I'm not saying that Skyward Sword as a game would have been saved by a better title screen. Rather that it could do a great deal more to ready you for the kind of experience it wanted to provide, and that's something all games would benefit from. After all, for all of the great moments we had in Ocarina, I think we all know what the first moment was that really grabbed us.